Welcome to the Society Pod, a podcast for entrepreneurs, marketers, and leaders. Here's your host, Jessica Yarmy.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Society Pod. My guest today has been in the fitness industry for the last 15, 20 years, both as a coach, a practitioner, and now as a founder. His current initiative, SPREN, uses the smartphone, actually, to track results and report on body composition. Welcome to the show, Jason Moore.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, excited to be here and, get nerdy on a bunch of topics together.
It's great to meet you, and I'm surprised that we have not crossed paths, but here we are crossing paths. And so if you were to introduce yourself to me or to others, how do you introduce yourself?
Within the context of this, I'm a techie type person. My background in technology of developing software and building computer systems and things like that, it's a lifelong thing. It started when I was 6 years old and went all the way through college and into my early career. As I kind of went through life and started becoming an adult and getting a job in the real world, I started to realize that health and well-being and fitness, possibly the biggest problem that we as a species are facing, basically. There's a lot of political and other cultural views on what the biggest problems are, whether that's war or poverty or discrimination or a bunch of topics. But I think one that unites all of us is the pursuit of health and well-being and fitness or performance. And longevity is another, label that gets thrown into the mix now. So I kind of realized that early in life, just increasingly became very passionate about it. Ended up me becoming a personal trainer and a coach and really pouring my nights and weekends into the pursuit of understanding the body and understanding these systems. I'm a very systemic kind of thinker. And so I transitioned from working in the energy industry, developing software there, to developing software for the health and fitness industry, and founded this company which originally started as Elite HRV, focused on heart rate variability, the autonomic nervous system, balancing stress and recovery for physical performance, but also for health and well-being and mental performance too. And then that ended up expanding into kind of a more comprehensive offering, which is SPREN, opening the doors to track things like body composition and to bring in the activity data, the exercise data, the sleep data, combining it with blood labs and biomarkers and things like that to help people understand themselves more completely, and then to also guide them on the hard part and the important part, which is the behaviors and actions that we take to, help us improve or not, right? So things like exercise, sleep, recovery, stress, what supplements might be important, what different foods might be important. And navigating all that at a high level is something that I think a lot of people do a great job educating about the principles on. But my life's work has kind of been in helping individuals find what works for them through these feedback mechanisms in the systems that we've built.
So if I'm a beginner and I know nothing about SPREN, how do you digest what SPREN could offer me?
We are well known for our assessment tools. When you're on a journey of improving your health, well-being, fitness, etc., often starts with an assessment. You assess your current condition, where you're at, and then you form a plan, do things, then you track to that plan, you try to track some of that behavior, and then you reassess to see if you're making progress or if it's working for you or if you need to make adjustments. It's assess, plan, do, track, reassess. We're very passionate about making that loop really effective and really accessible for people. We've innovated a couple of assessment tools. With SPREN, you can just use the camera of your phone to measure your body composition, for example. So you just put your phone down on the floor, step back, it scans your body. You get really accurate markers of body fat percentage, muscle mass, distribution of fat and muscle around the body. And that assessment used to be pretty expensive. You used to have to go to a lab for something like that. Now you can just do it from your phone. And that's kind of one of the things as an entry point that attracts people to SPREN.
Okay, so if I'm not a wearable user, I could still use SPREN.
Correct.
So like an all-in-one kind of tool.
What we've done with that assessment as the entry point is built out the system to go on the rest of the journey. You can connect all of your wearable data, bring in data that you're tracking in other places. We've always kind of had this philosophy of being an open platform and not kind of forcing you to only buy our stuff. We want to continue to get better at that over time. We're not perfect at that, but it's a philosophy that we're continuously improving on. One of the things that people do a lot on SPREN today is they want to measure and improve their body composition. They might have a longevity goal, they might have an aesthetics goal, how they look, or they might have a performance goal. In any case, nutrition is a big component of managing your body composition. We saw kind of a gap in the market for connecting these pieces together. So right now, what a lot of people do is they'll scan their body, they'll get a body composition assessment that's comparable to a DEXA scan in accuracy, and then they'll get a nutrition plan by answering a bunch of questions and adding in their activity data and things like that so that there's as comprehensive as a picture as possible. That generates targets, starting with protein, calories, and macros and fiber, because that's kind of a nice entry point into nutrition for a lot of people. It's not the end-all be-all that solves all problems that you could possibly solve with nutrition, but it is a great entry point, contributes some of the most to body composition changes. So you get this plan, then you can do all the food logging if you want. Some people throw up in their mouth when you say, like, you got to do food logging. People are like, I'd rather die. But other people are obsessed with it, right? Avid food loggers. Our philosophy, since we're not just a food logging platform, is to say, if you want to log food for the rest of your life and that works for you, great. Let's make it as easy and painless as possible. But we also think that you can learn a lot from just doing it for like 1 week, for example. Just really strictly logging everything for like 1 week can give you a really tremendous amount of insight and help you build self-awareness around how food impacts your body. And then it comes to help build that self-awareness. We have the reassessment.
Is your nutrition component like same as MyFitnessPal?
It's not exactly the same. One of MyFitnessPal's biggest strengths is that they've been in the market for so long. They've got probably the biggest food database because so many people have just been adding food to it. But what we found is that these days, there are open source or like databases that you can integrate with that have almost all of that food. And then we can actually fill in using things like AI, some of the things that are missing. Our food database, we find, covers like 95 to 98% of what people would be exposed to. Especially if you're in like a major city in the US, you would be like 99% or something. As you're logging food, again, if you only do it for 1 week or you do it for your whole life, in either case, reassessing that body composition and some other things helps you calibrate self-awareness. What we're trying to do is like understand how things impact our body so that we can make smaller changes and see bigger results over time. That's another kind of core philosophy that we have at SPREN. If we can shorten the feedback loop, normally if you go to get a DEXA scan or a body scan, you might do it once a year, or some very avid people will do it once a quarter. If you're only getting feedback once a year, it's really difficult to understand what's happening in between. You end up investing a lot of time and energy in a certain direction, maybe only to find out that it's not working. If we can shorten that time to feedback loop, then we can make smaller changes, and that's easier to do. And it creates that kind of compounding effect that we're looking for over the course of that year. That's a way that people use SPREN a lot. Obviously, exercise is an important component. Recovery. We have a long history of working with heart rate variability, or HRV, looking at recovery. It is all in service of this journey concept.
And that's interesting because a lot of the platforms, they started as a step counter, or they started as like a workout tracker, or they started as a calorie counter. You started with heart rate variability. Why start with heart rate variability? And like, how does that now help your product kind of be differentiated?
Well, I love the word differentiated. It also makes a lot of sense to not do the me too of what everyone else is doing. I kind of like to work from first principles. Here's what somebody needs to succeed in their journey. And as a coach, this I think made me a fairly effective coach. Somebody might come into me and say, I want six-pack abs, so I want to do lots of deadlifts or something like that. And I'm like, okay, so you have your goal, I guess, is six-pack abs, but you also want to do a lot of deadlifts. We can maybe relate these things. They're also kind of mutually exclusive in a way. And there's a lot of other things in your life that will probably contribute faster to your six-pack ab goal. I'm not against deadlifts. I like them too. So in any case, what I saw is that there is a big gap at the time that I was getting into HRV, which was over 10 years ago, in the market's understanding of things like recovery, right? And inflammation and stress in the body, and how these things kind of connect to exercise as a stress on the body that you have to recover from. But it's not drawing from its own bank account. It's drawing from your overall bank account of Like how well are you resting and recovering, getting enough sleep? How well are you eating and getting enough nutrition? How much stress do you have in your day-to-day life? And, whether that's from work or the environment or relationships, etc. I very quickly found that people who go exercise a lot, usually exercise is not the thing holding them back. It was all the other things holding them back. And I was looking for a way to show people that and also kind of validate it, right? Because it started as an intuition. Like coaches will probably resonate with this. A lot of the things that you discover as a coach start as an intuition. It's just a pattern that you start to see over and over again as you work with lots of clients. And you're not necessarily coming to the realization by reading research papers. It starts in your practice and then hopefully gets validated by science and research later. That drove me to HRV, understanding recovery and kind of a more integrated model of health and fitness. That eventually snowballed into body composition because I, continue to look for how to round out that picture. So things that I care a lot about are heart rate variability, body composition, grip strength, VO2 max, insulin and glucose, C-reactive protein. We're kind of getting into blood biomarkers, but these are all things that I think paint a fuller picture of what's happening to somebody or what their current state is. And from that point, you can just make so many more informed decisions rather than just guessing and throwing things at the wall.
So if we're specifically talking about heart rate variability, like I know you can get to heart rate via your wearable. Is the best thing to integrate your wearable into SPREN, or do you have a solution for getting to heart rate variability through your app directly?
Both. I love wearables. I think people, if they like wearing a wearable, I think it's a very useful thing to get, especially if it can track your sleep as well. A lot of wearables, I think the most useful thing that they do is track sleep, give you HRV from sleep, which helps understand recovery a little more completely. And then generally understanding activity, like are you taking enough steps or just moving around enough in the day? These are some of the most important aspects of a wearable, and they can do other things too. For people who don't have one or people who kind of prefer a different way of monitoring their HRV, we offer a camera-based solution for that as well. Essentially, what you can do is just take your fingertip and touch the tip of your finger to your phone's camera. Then you want to rest it on something like a table so you can keep it still. But light shines through your finger into the camera, and we can actually detect changes in blood flow that are flowing through your fingertip and pull out data like heart rate, HRV, and respiration rate, all from that short fingertip measurement.
That's very cool. And then you also have blood analysis. And so how do you get the blood analysis into the app? People who might go and download your app, how they can kind of bring this into their personal tech stack.
So again, philosophically open platform. We're in the process of allowing people to bring more blood data in if they've already got it from some other source, accepting more inputs on that front. But we also offer an option that works mostly just in the US, in the lower 48 for the US, is you can get a kit shipped to your house. It comes with a blood collection tool where it's similar to measuring your blood glucose if anyone has pricked their finger and measured blood glucose. But instead of one drop, you need a bunch of drops, so to speak. So it's a little bit more, but it's far less blood than you would get in a lab where you draw a bunch into blood vials. And it's just providing an option for people. What we've done is we've worked with a partner with a lab provider who has, all the certifications, and they do all the lab processing. So we don't have our own lab that's processing blood, but we integrate with this lab. They specialize in getting certain markers out of these smaller blood samples. So we can't offer all the markers of all the things, but we've curated 17 of the most impactful markers, including markers of inflammation like C-reactive protein, important markers like vitamin D, your lipids, so cholesterol and things like that, triglycerides, etc., and then hormones. So these things are some of the big picture, really important markers. So you do it at home, you put it back in the thing and ship it off. It goes straight to the lab overnight. They process it, and then the results get uploaded into your SPREN app. So then you can see them there with all the reference ranges and all the information about what those markers mean.
That's really cool and really holistic and comprehensive. There's a lot of different apps and trackers out there on the marketplace, and you kind of end up Frankensteining your personal fitness tech stack together of what you're tracking where. I appreciate the fact that you're trying to bring it all under one view, because it does all need to fit together as a puzzle to really truly optimize what you're doing. You're not like necessarily like anti or pro like a wearable. Let's kind of like take that same like thinking into the AI world. Where do you land on the use of AI, and how do you use guardrails in your own business to like leverage AI but not over leverage AI?
AI it's one of those topics that can be very polarizing. And I also have a love-hate relationship with it sometimes. I have a deep tech background and spend a lot of time working with AI and systems. But we also think that it's not a type of tool that waves a magic wand and it kind of just solves everything. Maybe someday, but we're not there, and I don't see a path to it in the near term. What we try to do is to use AI in a couple of ways. So one is we were an AI company, quote unquote, before things like ChatGPT came out. Machine learning has been around for a long time before these language models and stuff. So we use that type of AI in our camera tech, helping the camera see where you are in the frame so that you can stand in the right position when you're doing your body composition analysis is a real-time AI function that makes it way easier to do your scan. Kind of like when you're scanning a check, if anyone has deposited a check with their phone, it's like, oh, put the check in the frame, and then when it detects it, it automatically takes the photo. It's a similar type of AI that does that with your body. You step back and it's like, great, you're in the right position. It automatically snaps an image to then process into your body composition. We use machine learning very heavily to compare things like DEXA data with the image data to get the highest level of accuracy on our assessment tools. So those are some of the dimensions that are happening underneath the hood that people may not even really realize that that's happening. But that's very different than the ChatGPT types of AI. We also use those types primarily to help people make sense of their data or to navigate some of the behavioral changes that they're trying to make. So a couple of examples would be when you get a body composition analysis, even if you go into a lab and do a DEXA, you get this like printout report that gives you all these details and reference ranges and all this data. If you're lucky, somebody will explain it to you, but often cases they just give it to you and you're kind of like left to figure it all out. What does it actually mean if your android gynoid ratio is 1.2? You can go Google that and look up reference ranges, but it's kind of nice if there's a system that is already built in that's when you do that scan, it's just like, here's the ones that are out of range, here's the ones that are in range, here's what they mean. And then kind of you can have a conversation about then translating that into your practical context. If your goal is to maintain your health and well-being, you may not need to get overly excited if one of your markers is slightly out of range. But if someone gives you a PDF report and you see something that's slightly in the red, you might be like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Do I need to care about that? So we use AI to have that conversation. And then another way is in helping people with behavioral support. The rubber meets the road on all the tiny decisions that you make all day, every day. Somebody might have said, hey, it's important to get adequate protein. And you're like, great. Right. So then you go to a cafe, look at the menu, and you're like, well, I know these things have protein. I don't think that has a lot of protein, but I really don't know how much protein this meal has. And is that good for me or bad for me? So you can actually have a conversation with our AI system. Not only is it giving you kind of an understanding that like salmon, for example, is higher in fat and a little lower in protein than something like chicken usually, but it translates that into the context of your own data and your own goals. If you're just trying to get enough protein without overdoing it on calories, for example, in a meal, it'll kind of know what your targets are and be like, here's 3 options on this menu that you could choose from, and really kind of take the stress out of it. When we work with coaches and practitioners, sometimes we get the question like, oh, is this replacing the need for me? And I often will ask like, are you on call 24/7? Maybe in some cases, if it's a very concierge white glove service, yes, but 99% of the time, no. The goal is not to replace the coach or to replace the relationship, to replace planning and the kind of more complex thinking that goes into coaching, but it's to augment you. Coaches will say oftentimes they get 90% of the same questions over and over again. Somebody wants to call them every time they eat, call them every time they wake up in the middle of the night, call them every time somebody brings pizza home. AI can really help them cover those bases on those basic behaviors so that they can focus on the more complex stuff and the relationship.
Well, and it sounds like what your platform assists with is not just the data collection and the data capture, but then it's the prescriptive program of like, okay, yes, this number, but now what? How do you apply the numbers? And I think that's where a lot of people fall apart because we all have access to scales, a lot of information from our doctors or from our blood work, but just like the ratio you said earlier, it's like, I don't know, let alone like how to fix it. Like, I'm not sure. I think as an industry, getting people away from here's your in-body analysis and it just tells you every single thing that's wrong with you. I'm not an unhealthy person, but mine bleeds top to bottom. I'm not as bad as this is making it seem. But it gives you that feeling of defeat versus it seems like what your platform is doing is really like collecting the data. And even if it is all off track, it's like, okay, now what? And whether it's using AI to kind of define the now what or using specific algorithms that are in place, that's the important piece for people is the application of the numbers.
Yes. A friend often says we don't have an information problem, we have an application problem. There's so many dimensions to what you just said because if everything is in the red, you end up in many cases in a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of cycle. It's like imagine a child growing up being told that they're bad all the time, right? And they end up fulfilling that prophecy eventually, even if it was over-indexing on things that could have been solved, but psychologically needed to be framed differently. For us, you even have a system in part of our platform where if you're working with a coach or a practitioner, they can kind of hide the red flags from you so that they can see it and then have a conversation with you about things because the other problem is you can't fix everything all at once, usually. So it's helping people figure out what's like kind of the one thing that will move the needle for you right now so that we can focus on that. And that usually, ideally, will have a bit of a cascading effect and other things will kind of just move into place a little bit more naturally. Or you can at least then snowball the behavior over time. One more thing I wanted to double click on in what you said there, which is that when you discover something interesting and you go tell a friend like, you should do this or you should look into this, right? Oftentimes your friend will be like, okay, but they may not be inherently motivated to go pursue that thing. It's a little different if your doctor says, hey, like you're on the verge of having a cardiac event. That usually gets people's attention. For us, we're not somebody's doctor, so we're not necessarily trying to prescribe to them a medical intervention, but we're trying to help them come to the realization themselves and make decisions for themselves because it's just so much more deeply motivating and changes behavior and even your identity a little bit more if you come to that realization on your own. The problem is that historically you'd had to be like a scientist to do that because you'd have to be wading through all this data, even knowing what data to collect and where to go get it and what does it mean. So by making all of that easier and just saying track a couple things, do a scan on your body once a week, link up your wearable if you've got one of those. We will surface some of the things to you that you may need to pay attention to and kind of point you in the direction of like, here's what that means. For example, if you have a chronically low HRV, that can lead to accumulation of body fat around the midsection. It's not like a cause and effect kind of thing, but it's a high correlation. And that's a way to kind of get people's attention to say like, hey, maybe this balance of stress and recovery and exercise is kind of leading to this accumulation of belly fat. Here's one or two ideas for how you can improve it, but it's kind of up to you to decide that one resonates with me. I'm going to try that one. Let's do it and then reassess and see that it's making the changes that we're looking for, which can be very positively reinforcing. It gives agency to the person because they can make a little bit of the choices of their own versus just saying like, everyone has to do this. Just touching on a lot of the kind of underpinnings of how we like to help people build self-awareness and be the primary pilot. I guess AI has helped this term co-pilot become kind of popular. You need to be the pilot, you need to be the CEO of your own health, and then have the tools and the systems to support you on that.
And then your tool and your system, you can be consumer facing, but then you also go personal trainer facing and or gym owner facing where they could offer it as a service to all of their members, right?
We love partnering with organizations and practitioners practitioners and coaches, because one of the things is that even though we try to build the best tool that helps people in as much as possible, we still see that in the grand pie of a health and wellness journey, we're still a tiny slice. We can't be the experts on everything, and we need to partner with organizations and people to fill in the rest of the journey, whether that's providing an environment for people to work out in, whether it's a studio or a big health club, a place to go that has community and has equipment and has coaches and people that you can build relationships with. Our system is not delivering all of those things. Or that's finding the right supplements. I'm a big proponent of people addressing nutrition first through food choices, but supplementation, I think, is inevitable for almost everyone on their journey. It's very difficult to get all the nutrients that you need just through food, especially with how busy people are and all the other things we have going on. So we like to partner on that front too and help you figure that out. Coming full circle, one of the ways that we partner with gyms and clubs and fitness brands, they're often really great at providing an exercise experience and exercise guidance for their clients and members. But tracking all these markers, doing all these assessments is really tricky because you either need expensive equipment or you need to set time aside and charge for it. We help automate that. And then the other piece is nutrition is really difficult because even if you're able to give people some guidelines on nutrition, that mostly happens when they're away from you. They're not eating all their food with you. Having nutritional support that is there when people are eating or making grocery shopping choices or restaurant choices, etc., that's kind of where the magic happens with nutrition. And the fitness industry has really struggled with that because there's not a really economically viable way to help people with all that. And nutrition arguably is as important or more important than exercise for certain goals and certain conditions. So it's a big kind of struggle for a trainer to work with somebody even a couple hours a week, and then the other 165 hours a week that they're not together, it's all being undone. That is a win-win for all of us. So we're seeing that fitness brands really appreciate the partnership, and we do too.
So I know you've been in the industry for a bit, but part of the time you were in the industry was during COVID. There was obviously a reset of the industry during that time. What did you learn about yourself as a founder during that time? What did you see in the fitness industry during that? What were the COVID lessons learned?
So one thing is that stress got amplified during COVID. So heart rate variability, a lot of people get into it for different reasons, but it's a great way to monitor recovery from exercise and improve that. It's a great way to monitor stress and to help balance the nervous system so that you can function better throughout the day and sleep better at night and things like that. So HRV is really useful for this overall picture. When COVID came around and people were not going outside and they were losing their social connections, or at least the real ones, in favor of kind of these shallow quasi-social relationships that happen through social media, and sitting more, active less, eating worse, ordering takeout and delivery, spending more money, all these things combined, we could actually see that in a lot of people's data. So that was some interesting learnings. We ended up growing like a lot of organizations who serve people remotely, because you can use SPREN from anywhere. We ended up growing during those years because people were looking for tools and trying to figure out why life was getting so much harder. Then COVID itself was very interesting too. We had so many anecdotes, and admittedly, we're a little bit less flashy with our marketing. Probably could have done better with this, but you can see some reports of wearables and things where people saw that they had COVID because their wearable flagged it, right? So we had hundreds, maybe thousands of these anecdotes as well of people tracking their metrics on our platform and seeing before any onset of symptoms that they were getting sick and then going and doing a COVID test and coming back positive before any symptoms came on. That opened our eyes a little bit to that, and we realized that people were already doing that with things like colds or things like the flu or things like stomach viruses or stomach bugs. We would have people say, oh, my HRV was so off in the morning. I kind of was I feel fine. And then at lunch, I went home from work because I was throwing up. The data kind of gives you some predictive signals, was one of the learnings from the COVID time. And then the other piece, personally, I experienced this as well. A lot of the tools and systems and AI and the products in the digital world that are so powerful and convenient can be a bit of a slippery slope to a loss of connection with each other as humans. During the COVID years, kind of found a little bit of clarity on a personal philosophy that has been translated into a company philosophy, which is that we really want to build AI and tech that promotes well-being and doesn't take away from well-being. We want to stay very conscious of that one dimension, which is also connection with other people. That is so important. So that became a more powerful part of our vision for the future and something that we're even today only lightly delivering on and want to do more of.
Well, and if we go back more years than COVID, you used to be a competitive gamer. What's the through line between competitive gamer to tech entrepreneur? What are the similarities that kind of connect those two dots?
You know, my personality is pretty calm most of the time, and people may not intuitively suspect this, but I'm a highly competitive person. I love to compete and I love to win, but that manifested through sports, also eventually through gaming. There was a dark side of it as well. I think I was addicted to the dopamine and stimulation of video games in my late teens and early 20s. Gaming was sort of the thing that I had to overcome to then pursue bigger goals in my life. But I actually learned a lot from it as well, from competing and really kind of learning what it meant to grind against a goal over a long period of time to become really great at something. And then I've always had an entrepreneurial streak. At one point, I thought I would start some of my own gyms and open some gyms of my own. I helped friends do that prior to founding the current company. I was ideating and designing product ideas starting in high school and college. So that kind of just went hand in hand with me. And some of them were ideas for building my own video game. But this competitiveness also is somewhat what brought to my attention my degradation of my health and my performance. So in competitive video games, a lot of the best players are 14 years old. They have a lot of raw talent. Their reaction times are super sharp and their brain is very flexible and malleable and they can learn things super quickly. I've always kind of thought of myself as having those traits as well. But then as I got into around my 20s, I started realizing I wasn't able to keep up with those people anymore. I was falling asleep in school all the time, having issues that really were frustrating. Other way, which is that one of the most important things about competing is picking the right game to play. An easy example is I'm never going to compete in the NBA. It's just not in the cards for me. No matter what, I could train the best way for the rest of my life and it just wouldn't happen. Video games provide a lot of diversity of options so people can kind of find something that matches their capabilities and their interests more easily than physical sports usually. Over time, I realized that the game I want to compete in is essentially creating the biggest impact on health and well-being in the world. I have these very irrational goals. I want to help millions of people, but without having that mentality, it will never happen. It's kind of like that aim for the stars, land on the moon kind of concept. If I don't reach every person on the entire globe, I'm not going to think of myself as a failure. But I want to set our systems up in such a way that that could happen if the stars aligned. And then things like numbers just make sense to me in my head. They've always have. I feel grateful that finance and money and economics and all of that stuff comes naturally. That's an important aspect of business. To be able to serve more people, we have to gather enough resources to build more great things so we can solve more problems for people. So it's a kind of a virtuous cycle, but I'm not obsessed with the money itself. It's kind of a means to an end. We're grateful for our investors. I mean, we couldn't do it without our backers. We have some venture capitalists, some VCs that have invested in us. Drive by DraftKings, Meredith McFerrin, Boston Seed, Peter Blacklow, Amasia, a guy named Ramanan, and what I call super angels, Rudy, shout out to you, and others too. We have a number of people who are experts and have depth in different backgrounds. We have some professional poker players that have invested in us. We have athletes like Eli Manning and Matthew Dellavedova from NFL and NBA champions. We're really grateful for this. And then also doctors like Dr. Patrick Hanaway, who's a world-renowned functional medicine expert, Dr. Leah Lagos, who's a clinical psychologist with expertise in HRV biofeedback, Dr. Richard Isaacson, a preventive neurologist with expertise in Alzheimer's. One of the things that we look for in our partners Like, money is important for sure, fuels our ability to innovate and build great products for our customers. But the other is bringing in different dimensions. I can't be the expert at everything. I don't know everything about everything. I love learning and pouring myself into learning as much as I can about stuff, but we need to build a team, and that extends to our investors and advisors to really deliver all of this. It's an ambitious vision, but we're also really grateful, honestly, for the community going on this journey with us too. Our early adopters of our products were investors in some way, right? They didn't put money in necessarily all the time. Sometimes they would buy things, sometimes use things for free, but they invested their time and gave us feedback so that we could learn and improve the product. We use the same principles to improve the product and the offering that we use to improve our bodies and our health and fitness. We assess what the world needs, we form a plan, we execute to that plan, we track that execution, and then we reassess to see, is it actually solving the problems that we set out to solve, or are there other problems that may be more important to solve? And the community goes with us on that journey too, so couldn't do it without them.
It takes a village for sure, and it sounds like you have a really strong one, although we covered a lot of ground. If there's anything that's top of mind with you,
I hope that the things that I shared really touched something specific that somebody who's listening is trying to solve for, whether that's a business trying to help their clients or an individual on a health and wellness journey. You can find us SPREN.com, SPREN, or in the App Store. You can search for us there. I'm not super active on social media, but you can find me on like LinkedIn or various platforms if you want to connect with me. Our team is very responsive. We offer a lot of things for free. You get in and try to use some of our products. We love to hear from you and see, is it working for you? Is it not working for you? What can we do better? We love to hear from people, and there's ways in the product itself to contact us. We read literally every single one. So anyone that messages us, we see it and we appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for taking an actionable, holistic, approachable approach to your business and to your product. I think that's what the fitness industry needs. I think that's what consumers need. I, for one, will be checking out your product and I will report back. It was great to connect with you, and thank you for sharing everything you did with us here today on the Society Pod.
Thanks for having me, and great conversation. Love what you're doing, educating people on all these aspects. It takes a village. If we can share a few things with the world, that makes me happy, and hopefully someone learned something today.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Society Pod.